So you've heard it said that time heals all wounds. And while that may be somewhat true in a sense, I would also argue that it doesn't necessarily remove the wound, but it helps sort of heal, and the scar never disappears. And especially when you're 20 years removed from a particular tragedy like our guest is today. And I guess I could say I'm excited that I have this guest today, but the topic isn't completely exciting, but it will be encouraging, just to give you an idea. And so we're starting a series called Dark Before Dawn. And this is going to be about people who have experienced significant hardships or tragedies or loss or some sort of just catastrophe that they really felt the darkest times of their life. And then they made their way through, and there was a dawn on the other side of it. And so I'm very privileged and honored to introduce my cousin, actually, for the listeners that don't know. Angela Horton and I are cousins. My dad and her mom were brother and sister. We grew up together. We did holidays together. So, you know, it's kind of a cool experience just to see her. I haven't seen her in a long time, but to talk to her on this level is pretty exciting. But I will say, Angela has a remarkable story, and she has accomplished so much professionally. She's started her own company in 2005, and a cashmere, and I'm going to probably butcher the details and not do it as much justice as possible, no. So, but she started a company, and this cashmere company, and so clothing and linens for top luxury hotels, high-end stuff, people. I mean, she's just all about quality and service. I mean, she worked for Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren and the big names in that world, in that space. And really that all kind of accumulated into this business that she started. But I want to formally welcome my cousin, Angela Horton. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really such a treat. And I do feel like you know, your dad and my mom are sort of orchestrating this sort of co-creation today, if you will. And yeah. I think it's just such a wonderful thing that we're able to have both of us have the gifts of sharing, you know, with others, to help others, and to really, you know, there's things in life where you can either be shadowed or you can use your gift. And I think a lot of times we are shadowed for some time, and you don't see it, you know, you can't see the next step sometimes, but yeah, as life begins to unroll. And if there's one thing my mother taught me, was when you're focusing too much on your own issues and you're not helping others, or once you continue, you put that good energy to help others, right, you see that stuff come back to you like threefold.
What you're doing now and who you are now has sort of evolved. And so I want to paint this picture for them so they understand just the magnitude of your journey and accomplishment and who you are now. Like, I think I don't want to understate some of this, because you really have done a lot. But so audience, I will say some of this, you know, is not easy for us to share, either one of us, because we were on the front lines. We were in it with both feet when it happened. Angela, obviously more so than I, but still as a family unit, we all had to experience a level of this. But 20 years ago, this last February, Angela's mother was killed by her husband, Angela's stepfather at the time. And it was literally a shot heard around the world, a shock heard around the world, in our family core unit. And there's no words really to put onto something like that to fully describe the magnitude. But Angela and her brother, their birth father, just everybody around that situation it was turned upside down, life in general. And if you knew Angela's mom, Aunt Susan, you know, this just didn't happen. This just couldn't happen. This just would never happen. Like, she's one of those that you just put up there and just kind of look at, like, this is what good looks like. And man, whenever this all happened, I wanted, you know, we all went through a process, and still, even talking about it, it sort of brings back things, and I'm sure it does for Angela. But audience, I want you to really dig into this and really listen to what Angela's perspective is and how it sort of transformed and really built her stronger. So, Angela, I just want to have you maybe briefly describe, for the audience, just kind of without too many details or as you're comfortable, but like, where, you know, you were in Dallas at the time, you were, I don't know, approaching 30, if not 30. Am I correct at the time?
Yeah,
in that late 20s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about when you kind of got the news, and then what sort of transpired inside you emotionally, spiritually, whatever, like along those lines afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, you know, when my father, I had been traveling, I was with Frette, this Italian bed linen manufacturer that I worked for shortly after working with Tommy Hilfiger. And I was in Austin when he called to tell me, you know, this, and I was getting on a plane, and he said, I really need to talk to you right this minute. And I said, you know, they're telling me to get off the phone, that we're taking off. And he said, okay, well, just call me the minute, you know, the plane hits the ground in left field. And he said, and don't pick up the phone for anyone. And I knew right then intuitively that it was either, I had a feeling it was my grandmother. And then my second thought was my mom, because I had talked to her the night before, and she had shown sort of this like despair, this complete, like, you know, I'm so scared, I'm alone. I think I'm going to go to a hotel. And I'm thinking, my God, this is so weird. Like, I thought they'd worked through these issues. This seems so strange. And this is, you know, it was early in the morning, and I landed in Dallas, and it was actually Valentine's Day of all days. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting my bag off the carousel at Love Field. And some guy was like, you know, what are you doing for Valentine's Day? I'm like, listen, I got to go, like, grab my bag. I'm like running to the car. And I get in the car, and my dad's like, you know, where are you? I called Robin. That was my roommate at the time, because Frette had moved me actually from New York to Dallas. Actually, maybe just a few months prior to this, to cover this territory, to help with this territory in hospitality. So I said, well, I'll go to the gas station here across the street. And I just kind of parked, and he said, listen, I got to tell you, you know, your mother, you know, and actually I had numbers of friends that had already called, because this had already been released on the news. And so he said, your mother has been murdered by John, and they've taken him in custody. And I was like, what? I mean, ballistic, like climbing all over the car. I mean, I guess had the phone in my ear. Frankly, past that, I really don't remember, because it was all a really numb situation, as you can imagine. But I was just, and he was at the airport in Oklahoma City on his way, and my roommate got to the gas station. She took me back to the apartment. She'd already packed my bag. And you know, I don't think for a long time, honestly, other than, you know, now, you know, sometimes when you play things back in your head, whether it's something that you went through a long time that was, you know, you're really suffering or whatever, or you're, you know, challenged. When you look back on it, you know, it is like a bad dream, you know, so I don't really, there's certain things that are not so tactile to me, but I'm also this type of person. So I'm wired a little bit that way, where in a self-protect way, I'm sort of, you know, a little bit disillusioned, if you will. So that's another factor to put into the equation. But so I get there, and, you know, everyone is there at the house, you know, friends have come from everywhere. And, you know, it really took a long time to sort of process And I was truly like, couldn't believe that this man who she'd been married to, you know, for 12 years could in any way, shape or form, who'd never shown any ounce of, you know, temperament or anything. It was all just so foreign. So yeah, it was really, really like a surreal situation because there was no explanation for it, you know. But you know, it's interesting because as you go through the motions and finding out about murders that have happened, how they've happened, crime of passion, which it was because she was really wanting out of the relationship, and so she'd made it very clear to him that she wanted out and was trying to sort of amortize the situation, whatever. So I think, you know, as much as I knew that she wanted out, but we always kind of thought, oh my God, it gave her such a great life and she was so happy. So we, you know, and maybe she didn't tell us everything because she didn't want, you know, for us to think that maybe a second marriage had failed or whatever. So, you know, there was all these things going through our mind because at first I thought that there's just no way that this man could have possibly done this, you know, but, you know, and then after seeing him, you know, after my brother and I went, my brother came from San Francisco and, you know, I do know that one thing I can say, you know, growing up in Oklahoma and having this great foundation of like family and friends and the support system was really the beginning of the healing process right away. Like that is my number one gratitude factor, gratitude all day long for family and friends, because when things go to hell in a handbasket, so to say, if you don't have the structure of family and friends in your unit, you know, it's even more difficult, you know?
Right.
Can't imagine, you know, people that are a little more, this is probably my biggest calling is people that are a little bit more introspective and how to help them through trauma and tragedy. Because, you know, and in men versus women, because I think men and women handle things really, really so differently. But at the time, you know, having to go through that really long trial to figure out what had happened there and then processing in that whole, you know, the synopsis of everything and how it broke down and then being sentenced for life and, you know, everything to consider, whether it was a life sentence or not. It was like, it was still a major, major loss for my brother and I, like a hollow victory, because there was no, you know, we didn't have either parent. So it's a major void that emotionally we've carried, but I think we've done a really, really good job of taking something that is not so, it's not always so carte blanche, if you will. So I think one of the things that I especially owe to her is that she really had a firm foundation of faith, and I think that's really what got me through it, is that you know, I had different people suggesting different methods and ways. I mean, I do remember, and it's funny because I met this boxer, this guy who trained with Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard yesterday, and he's going to do a boxing class with me. And I was thinking about how when my mother passed away, and my friend Paige took me to this boxing class right away.
Oh,
and I mean,
an outlet. You needed that outlet, right?
I beat the tar out of that. I have never hit so, you know, this probably also was, besides my faith, was feeding the inner being in a restorative way, besides prayer and meditation, is to release through physically, because our bodies, you know, we're made up of cells and energy. And so all of that has to be moved out. It has to clear. So all of those clearings, even though I didn't really understand that at the time, I think that was the start of the process of really, you know, I ran back to Dallas probably a week and a half after the trial, still very, very much in the phase of anger and confusion still for a long time. And going through the motions of maybe throwing myself back into work, because that really felt like a natural thing for me to do, was just to get back in there and really, you know, hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And
I have a question. Hard. So, and I might just step in periodically. I want you to just roll and express and that kind of thing. And I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to ask maybe a question or two along the way of, so this fog that you must have been in, I'm curious because I can't imagine the weight that you felt like you were trapped underneath emotionally, physically, maybe all the ways of being trapped. Like I can only imagine that you felt under this weight for a long time. Just the mere existence of life in general probably just weighed on you. Was there a time or maybe an aha moment where you kind of felt that fog start to lift a little? Not that you were just, I'm better, right? Like, oh, I'm healed, because that doesn't happen. But was there a time through the process, you talked about it kind of expressing some physical energy, some meditation, those kinds of things. Was there a time where you felt the fog, you started to see sort of a light at the end of the tunnel?
I think actually it's interesting you asked that, because I haven't really, gone back to a time that was really specific, maybe where I felt sort of a fog lift. I do have to tell you that prior to COVID, which is a really long span from the time that I'd gone through all of that, but it can take years for certain people to really totally heal, or to recognize where they are in their life, because the time after was a blessing of healing, because I listened to my inner self really well. I knew that I needed to spread my wings. I needed to fly. I knew that there was a really big ambition for me, and that, I saw signs from her, with me. So I sort of just paid attention really to what was guiding me from the universe, from her. And, I traveled the world, and I have to say, some of my exposure to maybe, whether I was in China or I was in Europe or I was in South America, wherever I was, I always sort of felt this like awareness to the universe as a whole, like our existence in this world, on so many different levels, so, and how quick it is, how life comes and goes so fast. So I do believe that when COVID hit, and I realized the love and the loss that people were really, and the numbers that were just escalating before our eyes, and how people really needed help. And I mean, people close to me, obviously living it in New York was really, really, really unbelievable. It's probably like the worst part of my book, because it brought up those feelings of like what it felt, to endure that pain. And I just suddenly began to write, and I thought, this is so cathartic, and it was very reflective for me. I needed that reflection to just say, okay, look at what you've done from the moment that you lost her to grow and really evolve as a human being to help others. And that's when I saw sort of this shift, if you will. I saw this, so like, wow, you've done so much. And I don't know if it's because we were stopped in our tracks, and there was no going anywhere, and like the reality of like every time I would go to Central Park and I would be with those tulips and daffodils, and I saw her face just there with me in the flowers, and I was just like, oh my God, this is it. She, she's saying like, reach out to people, like get on there, use your platform and like help. And, I did. And I grew my social quite a bit just by being vulnerable. I mean, vulnerability and humble are two things that I think are the hardest things for people to really put in their pocket and go on with, is because, we don't want people to, it's so funny. My father, this morning, we were having this discussion, who had given me this suggestion with Harrison for parenting. And I thought to him, I said, I wish I could go back to 10 and you would handle me that way.
That's funny. I bet that was music to his ears. Not really.
He goes, well, this isn't my first rodeo, but, the way that maybe our parents handled things in the past and how we're trying to handle things differently, I think is such amazing strides of where the human being is going. And I don't think we give ourselves enough recognition for that. I don't think we give enough pat on the back to the people that are really making a difference in what's happening in our world.
Yeah. Amazing. And I'm glad you said that about the time that it took, because I I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, but I know that that is a topic when people are trying to heal from tragedy is, it does take time. This isn't an overnight thing. But for you, like it sounds like we're talking maybe decades, a decade of before there was really like this aha moment that you can identify. Now, maybe there were a lot of those little ones along the way that it was so long ago, we can't really capture those. And, you're writing a book now. And so you're capturing those on paper, which is remarkable. And I love that. But along the way because you mentioned you had a huge support system, and I think the audience would appreciate and really could stand to hear the importance of that. And can you maybe talk about just what that meant to you? I know it sounds intuitive and obvious that, oh, well, I had people around me, but sometimes in those situations, when I lost my dad, sometimes I just didn't want people around, and I know that's a factor. But so where did you have to get within yourself to sort of embrace those people that were trying to reach out?
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting point you bring up too. And like your time where you need people and your time where you need alone time, because that's also a very important element of healing is your alone time. So, and I'm not sure I really realized that at the time, because I am such a social creature at heart, and I love human beings. I love studying. I love learning things about people. And so I think it took me a while to really embrace my inner spirit. And I say that only through experiences, through, I guess from 30 to 40, I dated and had probably, Candace Bushnell probably should write Sex and the City based on my storyline, because I had so much fun and I had such a I remember my mom actually calling me when I first moved to New York, and she said, she would inevitably call on a Sunday night at the hour that Sex and the City was starting. And my roommates and I would be like sitting down with our pizza, and she would be like, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Sex and the City." She's like, "Watch it, don't live it,"
Nice.
And I sort of giggled at the whole thing. Yeah.
I can hear her saying that. Yeah.
Totally. I could, and then, now in retrospect, I think she'd be watching that show with me laughing and enjoying every bit of it, because what I felt was, and I feel this in a lot of ways with people that interact with me in an angelic form, whether it was a man that was really dynamic or successful, people that by happenstance came along the way, and have been really modules and great mentors. So I think if you pay attention to those spirit guides, or whatever you want to call them, the other people would have said it was a suitable husband or a suitable this, and that's not at all what they were for me. Frankly, they were sort of conduits to get me to the next place, that, if you will. And this is also something that really resonated during COVID was me, myself, and I, and answering to me versus letting people sort of cast my life. I was like, I'm gonna write my own story here. This is me, Angela.
Yeah.
So trusting myself, we don't trust ourselves a lot. So I think if there's anything my mother would have wanted, it was to know that she'd raised her daughter to really like have both legs to stand on, and our grandmother, I think Louise gave us such empowering words and, scriptures to hang on to, which, really, really, like, I could pull those things out sometimes, and they just gave me such amazing faith and amazing touch to my heart,
Yeah.
So, but I still, right now to this day, and I had to open different chakra. That was my throat chakra. That was, where I couldn't voice and I couldn't say things. I couldn't really public speak until COVID came around. Then I just started doing these lives. I had people actually, Annette is here now. She's like, I just want to listen to you because I want to be a voice like you. And I'm like, and you can be. And that's what I've been. I've been sort of a mentor to others, to help them build businesses, to help them. And I think that is absolutely what my mom would want. She would want me sort of spreading the word of goodwill.
Of course. And I for the audience, you are a picture of what a version of your mother, like from someone
Mm-hmm.
who knew both. Like the audience could get a really good glimpse of the kind of person Susan was by looking at you and what you're doing. Like you are kind of going down that journey that, you know, she would really be standing up and really like giving you a standing ovation for. And I think that's remarkable and an admirable that you're pouring into other people and investing in other people, because like, let's face it, like when this all happened, you were sort of on this upward climb professionally. Like your career was taking off. Like you are in this, you know, big time role in the clothing and linen industry, and then you start a company to do the similar thing. I mean, after this tragedy, not many people can start a business with everything going well in their life, let alone kind of what that was. 4 years later, you start this company, and you know you're in New York doing it and doing it at a high level, doing it well, and like you said, some of the process of still healing, but you plugged
Yeah.
yourself into your job, right, to your work a lot.
Yeah. I think also a lot of this sort of burn in my belly, if you will, comes from my father. So, you know, we're made up
Sure.
genetically of certain things about our parents, but my father, you know, also had this sort of like, you
Yeah.
don't get the flat belly without the sit-ups, and it's, this is the truth in everything. If you
Yeah.
don't do the work, you don't get the results. And
Yeah.
I did push through a lot on my business when things were really 2008, when like Lehman fell and I had to let my cute little assistant go in Dallas. There were really tough decisions that I was faced with, and you know, keep Neiman's cutting orders and all the things that happened that were such learning lessons. And those were, that time was also a place of ego. It wasn't a place of spirit. It's
Wow.
really interesting because I look at that and that was like the ego Angela. That was like, you know,
Mm.
because I was on earth, here on earth, I was in this like, you know, presence, but I wasn't really like living what his bigger plan
Different
was. And
perspective, right?
completely. And it took me a long time to kind of to get there. And I think probably when that all happened is with Harrison, because when you have a child, the perspective of living creatures and the miracle of life is really truly, as we know, like the most mesmerizing thing in the world. And I was resistant to having a child, only because for a lot of reasons. I didn't have my mother. I thought I needed my mom to have I don't know. I would make up excuse after excuse after excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, what happened was it was a timing thing too. I mean, you know, I think I was put in a position where when things kind of came to a stop with the business, and then I began to say, okay, you know, am I living this very plastic life? Plastic to some, it could appear that way. But I was always very like in touch with, you know, okay, this is all fun and games, but the reality of like what's special here.
Mm.
And you know, and then when I met Alessandro, who is really like, I mean, could be my biggest driving force for learning more about myself through him, if you will, because he's a really good sounding board. We are, as they say, opposites attract from on every level. We are so opposite, and I never really like thought like, and I resisted like letting go and love, because I thought, oh my God, like I want to make sure I know what I'm getting myself into, because I don't want to get hurt again, you know, obviously after
Mm-hmm.
everything I've been through. So I was like, you know, let's just like take this baby step. I'm very pragmatic from that point when it comes to stuff like that. But then, you know, when you have your child and you go through these process of their growth and seeing them and the whispers that they teach us, I think are just, I mean, probably my greatest learning, you know, curves were through him. And I know that my mother, whether, you know, Alessandro in my mind was right, wrong, or indifferent, I know that he was put there at the time for a reason, for to make this magnificent child that we've made. And he's really stellar. I mean, he's like something off the charts, you know, in terms of just procreation and whatever. It's just
So what do you know, when we talk about this theme of dark before dawn, and there, you know, I always go back to the scripture that talks about tears flow in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And I wonder, you know, there is another side. Like you can push through and get to the other side of the grief, the pain, the scars, the hurt, whatever, even in a sense of, someone betrayed somebody, or, someone was this, it doesn't always have to be a loss of life, but people's tragedies look different, and it's all relative, right, to the level of pain that they're suffering through. You have you have a child, now, and what have you learned most about yourself? You said you kind of had to get a little more introspective and become strong and more spiritual. So anything that you've learned, I just did a podcast where I talked about learning from my daughter's volleyball team, some life lessons that I was reminded of that I kind of lost sight of. So it's not uncommon that we learn through them. But what would you say having the child has transformed most about you as a person?
First and foremost, my patience, because I guess I realized, like, I'm pretty like even killed most of the time. Actually, my brother says, like, I don't understand, like we could throw anything at you and like nothing really phases me. Probably because of the trauma of loss. Like when you go through something like that, like people tell you things and nothing really shocks me. Yeah. So, but I think with Harrison, one thing that I've noticed is that he does say things that that I know are coming from up above. They're so gentle and they're so innocent with the way they call things, that you just see things through such a rose. I mean, I've always seen things in the light. I mean, I can be in the dark for very long because I always see the stars. So for me, I truly like think that children just put this level of like the beauty of everything. I mean, I just think you have to really see the positive side of things, no matter what the situation is. There's always something worse. There's always a way to overcome. There's always a way to overcome, always. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's just the will and the way to let your heart let it go. I'm still learning. I mean, I thought my other chakras and my other energy fields were closed. It's really just my heart that I still have some work to do on. I'm getting there because I really want it. I want it so bad. So I'm at an age where I'm just beginning to see, okay, like, let's let go of like the protection and let more love in. I can give love all day long, but if you're not letting, I need to let it.
Right. Well, when you, like, I think you said it earlier was key. When you talk about loss, you kind of have walls up at some point and you just refuse to be giving the keys to someone else to hurt you. Right. You want to keep the driving. You're the driver of the bus now. And so the reaction mode can feel overwhelming, and that vulnerability sometimes isn't always great, right? It doesn't always feel good, but I'm glad you said what you said about your heart and some of the things you're still trying to let go of. I'm going to have you put your money where your mouth is right here. And this really wasn't planned, but I know you can handle anything. People that have been hurt or experienced loss that was at the hands of someone else. Mm-hmm. At what point do you feel like you either have, or do you feel like you're in the process of forgiveness for the person that did all this?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So I think, a lot of times we think we've forgiven, you can say I forgive, but the trust factor is, it's a really fine line. So I think, I go through ins and outs of that, in forgiving just for the sake of like, I just want to surrender a little bit more to what God has in store, because I really believe if you can't let it go, that it's really, you really cannot bury things. You have to let that healing go. Even, and I could give you 10 ways to do it. Actually, that's my mission right now. That's what I'm working on with the producer, to do something that would be really, really incredible. But I think that if you get to a point where you feel in your heart like you really want something, you want to heal, you want to be better, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. getting there, right? It's just getting to that point.
So when we're talking about freeing yourself in areas where you may feel a little bit still confined or bound up, maybe in your spirit even, has it been a process, or is it still one of those things you're working on about forgiveness? Because of course, when we talk about that, because I'll build some context around it, we talk about forgiveness and it's not for the other person. Like, I don't think that gives them permission. Like, you know what I'm saying? To forgive them isn't for them, it's for us. And it's something that God really calls us to do because, of course, he gave a lot of grace and mercy to us, and we're to extend that, even though it doesn't feel good or right or fair, right? Someone doesn't have to deserve our forgiveness for us to actually do that. And so I wonder if you've ever gotten to that or reconciled that in you, inside yourself, of, hey, the forgiveness is for me, you know, because the more I hold on to it and I kind of cramp my own style with that, I'm not doing anybody any favors. Like, I'm not doing myself any favors. And to forgive that person isn't for them, it's for me. Have you ever had that conversation with yourself or thought about it from that perspective?
You know, part of my healing through this wellness in the last 2 years has been doing mirror work, you know, like, if you start to see something in someone else and it triggers something in you, it's usually you that you have to ask the question to, because there really shouldn't be anything giving you anything. So if you're feeling that based on what somebody said, or you're making a judgment, or then, you know, I was asking myself, like, why could I not, you know, why would that trigger an emotion of anxiety or trust or this? It's because I haven't forgiven, you know, the inner, what's inside of me, something that, you know, is saying, okay, it's okay. You know, we're human beings, things happen. There's nothing, some things that are just not in our control. And once you've given that, you know, and you've really been able to say, okay, you know, that was in God's plan, and that's the way. Now we move forward from here, because forgiveness is a big word, you know. So really, it's like love. It's like, you look beautiful today, but that can become like you know, you need a glass of water. It could be, you know, the words. So, I mean, particular actions that you go through or experiences that you're just like, oh, okay, you know, that's okay for me now. I'm okay with that, you know. I'm okay with that.
And I actually wrote about your mom and the situation in my book last year, and in the chapter of forgiveness. And you talk about, you know, having some mirror time. I was really having to get in the mirror and be honest with myself about forgiveness along the lines of the person who hurt her. And it didn't happen overnight either. And I'm far removed, again, compared to you and your brother. But I still had to get there, because my first emotion and reaction is anger, rage, just like retribution, like revenge, like my first. And so I think, you know, the long line of our family and bloodline that where I get that. But I really had to just kind of be like, look, it doesn't do me any good. And it's kind of preventing me from maybe progressing spiritually to where I want to be if I'm holding on to some things like that. So I just was curious if you'd ever come to face with that emotion. But it sounds like you understand and acknowledge it. And it sounds like you're aware and that you're dealing with some of that stuff. But so I switch gears a little bit. You know, do you have any, and this is what I call a smolder switch. So to smolder this, when you feel like there's a trigger of your past with your mom and that tragedy and all the things that went with that were dark, and you feel maybe some of those coals and that fire start to burn a little hot sometimes, do you have a smolder switch? Like, do you have a go-to that sort of calms that, like kind of cools that, like tames that flame that's starting to burn a little bit, you know, as far as whether it's just pure sadness, despair, anger, any of that when you feel it flaring up, or does it even flare up really anymore?
It doesn't really. I mean, I think I used to have that, like maybe a few years ago, but really, like when I see my friends like with their moms or whatever, and I always try to make a point to explain to them, like, cherish this time, because, you know, it's really, really important. You know, I hang on to so many beautiful memories with my mother. So I think it's just really important to remind people, whatever the relationship is, you know, whether it's with your father, your mother, your brother, is to really try to work on, making people aware. One of the women in the building the other day, well, my mom is here, so I can't, and this and da da da. And I said, oh my gosh, no, like you go and you need to like, so it's interesting because, we see things so differently after we've gone through this. But I think one of my biggest lessons that I would love to try to convince or get people that don't believe this is that the spirit never dies. Because people die, the body goes, but the spirit stays. And I think that is the greatest thing. If you can hold on to things like that, like I was telling you, like I just pay attention, whether it's like this magnificent rainbow or it's even something Harrison says. And I'm like, no, wait, my mother made him say that. Like, like that was not an accident. What just came out of his mouth, that was for me to hear, to remind me to pay attention.
That's
good. So it's whether it's in words, whether it's in the smell of this pumpkin candle that takes me back to a moment with her, or it's cooking with somebody, or digging in the sand, and all these beautiful things that we are so fortunate to wake up and feel the feet under our, our feet on the ground, or to sip the coffee, or whatever it is that just gives us so much pleasure. It's phenomenal, Like what a great gift. And we get going, and then we just.
Yeah. And it sounds like, I mean, gratitude's a huge component of what you're describing, and just every little granular moment, right? Because like you said, I mean, like you lived it 20 years ago, that it can be taken away any moment. And we all say that, right? Life's precious. We don't always get guaranteed tomorrow. We all say that, but are we living in appreciation of that fact? And so that's a good point that you made. And I hear you, without really saying the word, I hear the gratitude factor inside you. So as kind of our last thing and last question, I just wanted to ask you, this has been awesome. I've enjoyed this, and I know the audience
I have too. It means so much to me.
Hey, there's somebody out there that needed to hear a lot of what you're saying. And so I want to close up shop with this. So we talk about dark before dawn. We've covered a lot of the dark. We've covered some of your journey to get, migrating to that light, at the end of the tunnel that we talked about. And what I said earlier was you're never completely healed. I get that. The scar is always going to be there to look at and really acknowledge. But what does your dawn look like? Like if you could fast forward, 3 to 5 years or so, like, what is the dawn, the light? What does it look like for Angela Horton?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I mean, the horizon in front of me is something like endless. So I feel like I told you, I really have this ambition to take things to a level that I really make a difference in people's lives. I'm so thrilled to be where I am here in Florida, where my mind is expanding. The people that God is putting before me are so incredible, John. And it gives me chills to think about it, because I know that the path is really unfolding and fast.
Nice.
And it's going to be really, really, really fun. And I think, we'll see what, it's the question that people don't ask probably anymore in interviews, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because, life is a journey each day. And I think this is another really place where we need to just pat ourselves on the back, especially during COVID, is because humanity has gotten to a point where we're not only saving the earth, and it's amazing what people are doing. It's really amazing, the joint forces and what people are doing holistically for wellness, for better of all human consciousness, and being on a higher platform. Like, see those high flying discs, see the things that are, we've all been living this linear life, and we need to respond to source. We need to respond to what the messages that we're getting from God. Just keep listening to God, because every day he's us something that is a gift.
Yeah.
And if you go to that place of a positive mindset, and you know, see when you have those triggers, see when they happen, and just recognize them, and the feelings too, because feelings are very important. We all are sitting with feelings of, you know, whatever it is, the joy. I mean, I don't think I show my ecstatic as much as I used to, and I don't show my sorrow as much, because I recognize the feeling. I say, that's really wonderful. And I'm like, inside, I'm like really excited about it, but I'm like,
right.
Because I know that it's just a temporary moment. And, but I'm still inside. I'm like, oh, thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because it's really, really wonderful. That's the awesome. Good, the bad, and the different, because the bad is what's giving you the growth. That is where the growth is coming from. And
that's huge. That's amazing. I'm glad you said that, because that is exactly what we as people sometimes avoid, because I mean, nobody likes pain, nobody likes struggle, nobody likes hardship, but sometimes doing the hard things or undergoing some of the hard things is exactly what you said, is where we grow. I mean, you know, from the physical training side of things, we both work out, like that soreness is a good thing. That's a good thing, right? So we're trying to build muscle, we got to break it down. So man, I don't, that's all I have for you. And I really appreciate, it's been a joy and a blessing to see your face. I don't get to see you enough, but
you're incredible, John. Keep doing what you're doing, because you are really, you're on your path.
Thank you.
I mean, your dad is like so incredibly proud of you. I just want you to know that. And my mom too.
Yeah.
They're up there in heaven. They're just like cheering and saying, woohoo.
That's right. No, thank you for saying that. And if I keep bringing good people like you on, I think I just have to get out of the way and let good people talk. That's really what my role is. So
well, you're bringing it out. You keep doing it. Right. You're a magnet for it. So just keep doing that.
Thank you. All right. Well, Angela, audience, as I close this out, audience, thank you for digging in. I told you it was going to be powerful, and it was. It never disappoints when I talk to Angela, and her story is remarkable, and just what she's accomplished and overcome is the perfect way to start this series, Dark Before Dawn. So with that, audience, she's been Angela Horton. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.